Hey everyone, I am excited to share that the Kickstarter campaign for Summer Tour the Game is now live. It's an adventure-based board game inspired by those trips following our favorite bands around the country on summer tour. You drive your little hippie van piece around the country, you're chasing shows, you're collecting concert tickets. It's a good time. So visit summertourthegame.com to learn more. You'll find videos and info as well as a link to the Kickstarter page where you can back this and make this game a reality. You can also find the Kickstarter page link in the show notes of this episode. If you go there, you can back the game for just $30 and you'll get your own copy of the game. We have several other tiers available all the way up to being a miracle backer where you can actually get your name in the game for this and all future editions of the game. But here's the deal. We only have until June 11th to reach our funding goal, so your support would mean a lot. Please consider backing Summer Tour the Game today. And thanks for tuning in to Tales from the Lot. Tales from the Lot, Greatest Hits Volume 2. I'm continuing my look back and celebrating all the fantastic guests who've made 25 episodes and over 25,000 downloads possible. So special thanks to all of my guests and to you, the listeners. But up first, from episode 13 is Jeff Kerper, whose brother Gary I had on for the Cornell episode. He reminds us about that old adage that it's the thought that counts in gift giving.
Then you mentioned my brother. So he went off to college and he had called me and he said, everybody's talking about this band called the Grateful Dead up here. And so I bought him, his birthday's in January, and I bought him the album of Skeletons from the Closet. I mean, that's what you do, right? You get the greatest hits. Yeah. But I got it, he was away, and I think I got it in like November or December of 76. And I slit the plastic. I wanted to hear it, man. I couldn't wait. So I slit the plastic. I put it on, I put the headphones on, and I never gave it to him. I was like, this is pretty good, man. This is interesting stuff. So that was my first exposure to them. Mm-hmm. And then a friend from high school lent me Skull and Roses and Year of 72. And it was all over. I mean, just the headphones in my room with Bertha. And it's like, wow, this is different. This is not unlike anything I've ever heard before. And then, China Cat from Europe 72, Jackstraw. There's just so many great songs. And that was it. Full speed. We were into it. And then the Dead movie came out also before I ever saw the band, and so we went to see the movie. It was a huge, field trip. And wow. And we were like, oh my God, are we ever going to get to see this band? It really gives you this feeling that like people waiting in line and stuff like that. We're like, will I ever get to see the Grateful Dead? And then I remember driving in the summer and they announced that they were playing at Englishtown with Marshall Tucker opening up. I mean, what are the chances? Was Marshall Tucker, the New Riders, or the New Riders, Marshall Tucker, and the Grateful Dead at Englishtown? And I just, U-turned on the road. I went to pick up my friend. We used to have to drive down to like the Macy's or the Alexanders in White Plains, New York, and go to Ticketmaster. We were probably the first people in the entire East Coast to buy tickets. We were waiting at the window for them to open up. And of course, it was almost unlimited seating. It didn't sell out. There was no such thing. I mean, they were going to let as many people in as they could. There was about 125 there, maybe 150,000. It was a massive concert. And 16 of us drove down. It was the Labor Day before senior year of high school. And we had 2 station wagons with 8 guys in each station wagon. And it was a memorable moment in my life. I mean,
yeah. Up next, Paul Chelberg from episode 14 reminds us to never ingest anything from a wizard.
So I think it was pretty similar to that. Just pretty massive crowd, massive sound system. The weird thing was, as we're walking in, and I think just as we're getting to our spot, there's this guy, and I noticed he's dressed like in this wizard garb with like a hat and a cape. And I look over, and it's hot. It's got to be getting close to 100 degrees, and I doubt there was any hydration going on either Ed or I's part at this point, and I see Ed taking a big swig of this guy's water vessel. It was like a wine satchel, one of those things that a wizard would have, I guess. And I look and I thought immediately in my head, I'm like, oh boy, that's not a good idea. And I kind of grabbed Ed a little bit. I said, hey man, what was that? He's like, oh, it's just juice. I'm really thirsty. And the light bulbs are going on and I'm thinking, oh no, this might be a problem. And sure enough, and I don't know if it was the mushrooms or if it was the wizard. I told him, dude, don't drink anything from a wizard. That's a bad idea at a dead show.
First of all.
Yeah. And it's getting close to showtime, and I notice Ed's behavior is getting like more and more erratic. And he's starting to bump into people, and I'm thinking, oh boy, the show's about to start. And, Ed's starting to lose it a little bit here. And, we were both, I would say fairly experienced voyagers at that point. We're 21, right. You've had some experiences, but he was starting to go off the rails a little bit. And I remember somebody by us, there must have been some other people having issues because they directed us, and I think it was like a wavy gravy, like medical tent, just like immediately to my right between the soundboard and the side of the field. And this person said, let's bring him over to the tent because he might start having a problem here. So we walk him over, and at this point the show's starting and it's let the good times roll. And at this point, I'm not going to let anything get in my way, including maybe Ed having a little bit of a, wizard dose or whatever happened, So right. I brought him over there, and somebody that seemed like it was a good spot, and people were, friendly, and they knew exactly what to do. So I walked the 30 yards back to my, blanket, which was just sitting in the exact spot, and right in time for that race is on to come slamming in. And then my favorite, trio of that Help Slip Franklins comes knocking in after that. And that was my first one of Help Slip Franklins. And I was just rocking. For the rest of the show, having a great time. Luckily, Ed, before the second set, he comes wandering back and he had regained his senses. So he was able to enjoy the rest of the show with me, and he was fine. So luckily it was crisis averted at that point.
Nice. I'm glad Ed was okay. Next up from episode 15, it's Aaron Okerson describing that moment that the band, that moment you get it, that whatever song that is they're playing, and it just hits you and you get on the bus. I'm sure you remember that song.
It was pretty life-changing. For a little bit, I was like, I still don't know if this is for me, but Bobby sang A Hard Rain's Gonna Fall, and I was like, oh man, this guy is like, he's up there, he's doing great. I thought that was probably the moment that I was like, oh, this is for me. This is good.
Yeah. You're a Dylan fan before?
Yes, I've heard, the normal Dylan songs. I actually, right before that song had started, I said, do they ever do any covers? Kind of thinking maybe, I might hear some other song that I know that's not theirs. But, and then they start into a cover. It was great.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that's a great Dylan song too. I love that song.
Yeah.
Up next from episode 16, it's Steve White with a fantastic story about Lake Placid.
So, we were just buzzing with excitement for this show. And this is where things are a little fuzzy for me in the beginning of the story, but it solidifies. So like the night before the show, or the day before the show, I'm hanging out in the basement of our fraternity drinking beer with a bunch of guys. And there's this fellow hanging out there who wasn't part of our friend group, or maybe he was, but he's talking about how he's heading for Lake Placid that day. And I said, wow, could I hitch a ride with you? And he's like, sure. And so I didn't know who this guy was. He was a friend of a friend, but I just wanted to get a head start on everybody else. I didn't have a car. I didn't have a ride. So I'm just going to grab the first thing that comes along. So I end up in this pickup truck with this relative stranger who I figure out about 15 minutes into the ride, the back window of his pickup truck is broken out, and he's broken out the back window of his pickup truck so that he can grab beers out of the bed of the truck while he's driving.
He did it.
Yeah, he'd done that. He'd made that a convenience for himself. And so I had a couple of beers with him, but I'm now riding, and he was a pretty good drunk driver, I'll say, which is, not something you necessarily want to say, but, we're cruising
But thank
along
goodness.
and he said, so where are you headed? Well, at this point, I'm on the bus, right? There's nothing I can do.
Right.
And I think this must have come up previously, or I probably wouldn't have taken the ride. But along the way, he goes, "So where are you staying?" And I said, "I don't really know. I just want to get to Lake Placid, and I'll figure it out when I get there." And he's like, "Really?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "So you don't know anybody in Lake Placid?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, there's this house on the outskirts of town. It's called the Spud Hut. It's this farmhouse in the middle of a potato field. It's a bunch of hippies there. They'll probably let you stay there." And I was like, "Okay." So he takes me to the Spud Hut. We get there and I see a bunch of guys out front playing hacky sack. And he says, "All right,
Awesome.
we'll see you later." So I get out of this truck, walk up to the Spud Hut and say, "Hey guys, my name's Steve, and I'm going to the show tomorrow. Is there any chance I could crash on your floor tonight?" And they're like, "Yeah, of course, no problem." So I just start playing hacky sack, drop my backpack down, and and now I've found a place to stay for the night. I don't know, a half hour later, they said, "Hey, we're going to go into town, and if we go to the Hilton, they've got a free buffet there. If you buy a beer, you can eat all the food you want." And I was like, that sounds
What?
perfect. So hop in a car with
That's
a bunch
awesome.
of other strangers, and we head into Lake Placid, go to the Hilton. I buy a beer and stuff my face with as much buffet food as I possibly can while they're doing the same thing.
Wow.
We're being well behaved about it, but, we're taking advantage of the system for sure. And, I've spent my money that is allocated for that night on a beer. And I turn around to leave the bar and with these guys, because I'm catching a ride home with them. And as we're leaving, we're exiting the bar, and I walk right into Bob Weir. Bob Weir is entering the bar, and on his left is Bill Kreutzmann, and on his right is Brent Midland. The three of them and I have now are blocking each other from entering or leaving the bar. And I knew that it was Bobby's birthday that day, the 16th. And I said, "Hey, Bobby,
Yeah.
happy birthday." And he goes, "Yeah, thanks, man." And I said, "How do you like the Adirondacks?" Because it was October in the Adirondacks, which is like the most beautiful time to be there. And he's like, it's freaking gorgeous. And we're really having a great time. And we're happy to be here. Like, that's so cool. And at this point, I'm like, I'm chewing on my tongue, trying to figure out what I'm going to say next.
Right.
At which point Brent goes, "Where's the head in this place?" And I said, "It's right down the hall." So I walk with Brent Midland down the hall to the men's room, take a piss with Brent, shooting the breeze with him while we're both, taking a leak. And at this point, I'm not going to leave. So I walk back down the hall with Brent back into the bar, and the guys that I come with are realizing what's going on. So, I mean, I had enough money to have one more beer. So I basically am hanging out with these guys. And the Bobby, Brent, and Bill kind of went off to their own corner, and we kind of let them be, but we're kind of all there slack-jawed, like we're hanging out in the Hilton with these guys.
Right. And how can you not be?
So I didn't really have much more interaction with them. Yeah, but also you didn't want to get up in their business too much either, right?
Oh, yeah.
So we
Yeah, no
had a
doubt.
polite encounter. But that was like I haven't even gotten to the show yet, right? And I've hitchhiked down in this crazy truck, found these crazy hippies, and then met the band all that night before. And then ended up back at the Spud Hut and spent the night. And then the next day, of course, everybody's rolling into town. And again, a lot of anticipation. And I think one thing that can't be left out about this was the venue was the Olympic Ice Arena. It's 1983. 3 years prior to that, the Winter Olympics, the Miracle on Ice, was in this arena. This is where the U.S. hockey team had beat the Russians. So this was kind of a legendary venue where the dead are going to be playing. And so there's a lot of vibe to the town. And we're only 3 years after the Olympics, so all the Olympic infrastructure is still present, and they can handle crowds and so on. But of course, also the hippies are all running around town blacking out the PL on all the signs. So instead of Lake Placid, it now said Lake Acid was what you saw everywhere you looked.
That's great. That's great.
And so the vibe was really good, Everybody's coming from all over the place, but you had to really want to be in Lake Placid to be at these shows.
It's a kung fu morning. Sun is shining on me. I'm just trying to get my space together. Can't you see? I need some kung fu coffee.
I have this 8 o'clock meeting at the office and I'm not feeling it.
Here, babe, try some kung fu coffee.
Kung fu coffee? Damn, that coffee kicked my ass.
There's 5 more bands at the festival today, and I didn't sleep at all last night.
Here, try some Kung Fu coffee.
That coffee kicked my ass. Our coffee beans are grown in our secret laboratory deep underground in Canada, with a recipe handed down from my Uncle Tom. Our facility is protected by several hundred top-notch ninjas who also participate in grinding the beans with their bare hands. And well, I suppose that's where we got our name. It's a kung fu morning. Sun is shining on me. I'm just trying to get my space together. Can't you see? I need some Kung Fu coffee. Kung Fu coffee. It kicks your ass. All right. Up next, from episode 17, it's Michael Loy Bay, who is coming to me from Budapest. He's got a great story about just the magic and the power that's in the live music of the Grateful Dead.
So a year later, it was April 30th, 88, at the Frost. So this is on Stanford campus. This is like 10 minutes from my house. And I didn't have a ticket. But that was the first time I experienced the lot, the Shakedown Street, the parking lot. Because at the stadium, that thing was a little commercial, right? There wasn't that scene going on. It was, you got your ticket, you go in, you see the show, you leave, you know?
Yeah.
Sorry, what were you saying?
Just not your typical Dead show.
No, it was absolutely not. Exactly. So that one, I was on the parking lot and only on the parking lot. I didn't get into this one. But I remember seeing these crazy people. Some of it was a little unsettling, I gotta admit. Like, I'm not one to glorify every aspect of the dead either. I think we have to remain critical. That's what a good friendship is all about, personally. And there were some people who were obviously lost, like obviously lost their fucking mind. And that was kind of sad to see. You know, I remember this guy with a little string, and he was pulling this little plastic alligator behind him and talking to it. And I was like, whoa, okay, there's that side too. But I remember the drum circle. I remember really good vibe, obviously. All the vendors. Just super fun party out there. I wasn't even inside, and the music wafted over. You know how the wind can waft it over, and sometimes you hear a little bit more and then a little bit less.
Right.
So I was circling around there in the parking lot in the Frost, beautiful Stanford campus. There's all these eucalyptus trees. It's just super mellow California, right? And this one waft of sound comes over, and it was, it makes my hair stand up just thinking of a memory of a waft of sound. That word doesn't even exist. But anyway, and it was Ship of Fools. I don't know where in that song, but that hit so hard.
Right. And the fact that you can give me chills talking about it.
Right. And I got this show. It was actually released. I found this, must have been pirated, but CD. I got a CD of this show. And so I can revisit. That's the beauty of this technology, right? I can revisit these exact moments. It's pretty strange. And, you know, I was stone cold sober. I was some high school kid. I was like 17, 18. Just seeing this whole thing. And this Ship of Fools, I was like, okay, this band is serious. Like, there's a lot of emotions here. They're not just playing through their best off here. This is different.
Yeah, they told the story.
And for me, that was the first time I got the Dead, believe it or not. it wasn't even inside. It was really weird. That was like, okay, I got it. Okay, these guys go deep, and they try every time, and sometimes they fail, but when they nail it, wow, And there's no band that comes even close to that, in my opinion.
All right, from episode 18, it's CP who tells us about how listening back to the shows that you were at can just bring you right back to that moment, that feeling, that time, that space.
And then somebody showed me Re-Listen, and I was like, holy moly, why didn't somebody tell me about this? And then he's like, I am telling you about it, and somebody else earlier. And then I found my show, right? I was like, oh, I found Dominguez Hills. And when I played it, I played it without looking at the set list because I wanted to just listen. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, holy shit, I can't believe I got this as my first show, Like I had no idea. I appreciated it because it was the first time that I ever took LSD, but I didn't really know a lot of the songs, right? Like it's so I remember Terrapin playing, and the clouds are doing their thing, they're swirling, and just like what is this? And it was like boom. I mean, that was it. I was hooked from Terrapin. Like it was just like, I can't believe this. This is like it's like an orchestra or something. You're just going, how are they doing that? How is a band doing that? And then like when they were, when they were going from one song into another, I was like, did they just like fade into another? I'm like, trying to figure it all out. And then, obviously with the help of the increased serotonin and all that, it was pretty wild.
All right. Up next from episode 19 is George Michaels with a story of how once you get on the bus, your life changes dramatically, instantly.
Yeah, it was one friend of mine, Kevin Cunningham, and we used to be club kids going to Manhattan. We were like 17, even too young to go in the bars, but they let you in. And then one day his brother Mark said, hey, do you want to see the Grateful Dead up in Saratoga, New York on a Sunday in the summer? And, we said, okay, why not? And it just turned into a thing. It really rained really hard. It was 1984, and I lost my car for 3 hours. I was in a portisane with a girl and my friend also for a while. And the music was cool. They did Satisfaction that night. It was quite a show in the rain, and just something clicked. And then all my friends, we all went from being club kids to deadheads overnight, literally, to the point where, the first year I had seen like 15 shows right away. We were traveling. The next show I went to was in Virginia, and then I just started going, but not 100% every tour, every show, but,
it seems that once that button is kind of flicked, you just dive in because there's so much to dive into, really, like as far as past history and
it's like where's this world been? It's almost like going.
Where's it going?
Yeah, exactly.
At that point,
it was a really cool thing, though.
Right. And so you saw like 15 shows the first year, and then
I saw a couple in the fall that year. I went down to Richmond. I got my friends to go down to Richmond. Then we saw the Meadowland shows. But then in the spring of '85, that was a lot of fun. We went up to Springfield and did the Nassau shows when Phil broke out, Tom Thumb Blues. And I went up to Rhode Island that tour, and then down to Philadelphia, of course. I think I did 9 shows on that tour.
All right, from episode 20, it's my good friend Kurt Vader. Here we're talking about taking his dad to see the Grateful Dead, and what a great dad move that was, by the way. We brought the Grateful Dead movie from Blockbuster or somewhere and to your house to watch with your dad to turn him into a
my dad?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we right there in your living room. We watched the Grateful Dead movie, and that's what got your dad sort of on board with going. He's like, they're not bad.
He went to, was it 93 he went to or 94? He went to one of those concerts with me.
Right. So like I have this vivid memory of you and I rolling up to his office because he was sort of the boss of what he was doing. And we go up there and he's on the phone and he's like, yeah, I got to go. Yeah, I got to go. Yeah, listen, I'm going to a Grateful Dead concert. I got to go. And you guys take it off to that. And I think we met you somewhere along the way because I was like, I was too cool for that. I was like, I like your dad and all, but I think I'm going to go hang out with these people who are taking the acid.
I kind of remember a little bit. My dad, like I said, was into Christian music, but he was a good dad. He still is a good dad. He's still around, and he always showed up. He was there. He'd show up. He'd go to all the stuff, and I think, I'm like 17 or 18, and he wanted to see what I was into, and it's weird because that's their era, the Grateful Dead.
Mm-hmm.
He never got into that stuff. He was into other music, never got into the hippie shit, But I think it was just, he was a fish out of water, man, like
totally.
All these hippies doing cartwheels and tripping their balls off.
Didn't he take your mother back the next year or something like that? Like
No, mom never went. No.
Oh, okay, all right.
Just the one time. But
gotcha.
I was a good dad thing. That was a good dad move, As a dad now, sure. I really appreciate it,
All right, from episode 21, it's Tommy Kennedy with a story of how easy it is to forget that the real world is still out there when we're in the Grateful Dead zone.
It was early 70s. We were doing a lot of experimentation back then.
Right.
And back then, some people used to paint their faces to go to a Dead show. And so we decided to paint our faces to go to the show. And we didn't have tickets, right? So we had to take the trolley. And I had my face all white with red lips, blue eyeshadow, and black teardrops coming off my eye. And we get on the trolley, and this one woman just burst out laughing. And we're like, what's so funny? They're like, you guys. We're like, we're going to a Dead show,
Right, the circus is in town.
We got tickets and we got in, so it was great.
All right, in episode 22, Bruce Asher tells us a story. I don't know, maybe it's a fairy tale, but evidently you used to be able to just walk up to the box office and get tickets the day of the show.
I saw them out in Salt Lake City, which was a tremendous show in 1981. That's kind of a cool road. That's my favorite road trip story. And it also involves another musician beside the Dead in the story. I had graduated college. I was traveling out west, bouncing around. I had visited friends in L.A. We went up the coast all the way to Vancouver, and then I made my way across. I ended up in Salt Lake City with the intention of spending one day there. You just, do some sightseeing and hit the road. I check into a cheap hotel. Middle of the afternoon, I see a bar right around the corner from the hotel. Says live music tonight. So I go in, have a beer, ask the bartender what's going on. He says they canceled tonight. There's no band. I'm sitting at the bar and I'm reading the local newspaper and it says Grateful Dead, Salt Palace, August 12th. So off I go. I run to the arena. I buy it. I buy a ticket. I check into University of Utah, cheap $6 a night rooms for students. A couple nights later, I'm back at that same bar. And there's a band playing, and I'm sitting at the bar with my back to the band. Suddenly, I hear a very familiar saxophone. I look over, and it's Grover Washington. And he's playing with some local band in Salt Lake City at this bar I'm at. So I went up to him during the break. I said, what are you doing here? He said he was in town recording. He felt like playing that night. So in the span of, a few days, I saw Grover Washington, the Grateful Dead in Salt Lake City.
That's awesome. Being able just to walk up and get a ticket, those were the days, as Archie would say.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Up next is Bill Bigelow from episode 23 with a story I'm sure is familiar to all of us about that certain family member or friend who turned you on to the Grateful Dead.
My very first concert, my friend Ned Leathers, I just want to give a plug to Ned, who is no longer living. But Ned just had such great musical taste and just sort of began taking me along. And I can't even believe that my mother let me go. But on May 15th, 1968, at the Carousel Ballroom at the corner of Market and Van Ness in San Francisco, later became the Fillmore West, the Hells Angels had a concert with Big Brother and the Holding Company as headliners and the Youngbloods and a little group called Rejoice. It was $1. It said no minors. I was like 16 or whatever I was then, but they weren't checking IDs. And so I felt like, I had kind of discovered the meaning of life. I'd never seen anything like Janis Joplin and Big Brother before. And so Ned and I began going to concerts pretty much every week, every weekend, and sometimes more. And the Dead, at that point, that was in the little sliver of time when the Dead and the Airplane and Quicksilver and Big Brother were running the Carousel Ballroom. And then Bill Graham had the original Fillmore over on Fillmore Street. And so I began seeing the Dead at the Carousel. And and they were uneven, I can remember one time going and there might have been like maybe a couple hundred people there or so. And I remember turning to Ned and saying, God, I hope that they can get some enthusiasm up with so few people. And so those were before there was anything called Deadheads. Wow, that's some great bands to see at that time. It was an amazing time, and I don't know if you've talked on your show about Bill Graham, and you kind of had to love him and hate him, because he was a mean SOB, and he. But on the other hand, you knew that if at a Bill Graham organized concert, they were going to start on time. You were going to get three bands with doing a set each, and then they were all going to start again, and they were going to play at least until 2 a.m, if not more.
All right, 2 a.m. That's a long show. From episode 24, it's Bob Ingersoll and his lovely wife, Belle, with a story of a chance meeting with Jerry.
I loved it. It was great. Jerry was, Jerry. I mean, what can you say? I mean, I have Jerry stories, crazy ones, in what was it, Bill? 93, 92, something like that, in the Boston Garden. We were slightly altered and happy. And after the show, I mean,
we were blown away.
And the show was so good, we were literally blown away. The Boston Garden empties out. It's just me and Belle, and we had moved over and sat down in some seats behind the stage to kind of, because we had to get back to my aunt and uncle's house, which meant going out and getting on a trolley to the green line to the red. I'm from Boston, so I know my way around. But we were like, whoa, man, that's going to be a hassle. And so we sat there, trying to bring our molecules back together. And then a sliding curtain opens up, and then Jerry walks out, and there's nobody in the place except Belle and I and Jerry. And both Belle and I were like, Jerry, like that. And he looks up and he smiles like from ear to ear and waves. He's got the briefcase too, so we're like tripping, well, literally and figuratively. And so he waves, doesn't say a word, smiles, carefully walks down the steps and goes out. And Belle and I just looked at each other and goes, wow, that was cool. That kind of stuff, it's those kind of moments. And I know everybody that's on your show, at least, and more so than even some of the stories we have that are like that. They're like the moments that are part of your life that you reminisce back to, and it all kind of fits together. You know what I mean?
I get it. You're tired of the same old music festival routine, the day-old porta potties, overpriced food and water, finding the perfect spot for your 10 by 10 foot tarp. Well, I've got the answer to all your festival and concert going troubles. Introducing the Hippie Hologram Music Festival app and mini projector. One moment, you're nestled comfortably in your beanbag chair, surrounded by the soothing aroma of incense and the low light of your lava lamp. And then, shazam! Your living room becomes the epicenter of the ultimate music festival experience. With the Hippie Hologram app and mini projector, you can teleport to the grooviest festivals without ever leaving the comfort of your home. Picture it. You, your snazziest tie-dye onesie, and thousands of holographic pals. And you can dance like nobody's watching, because nobody is! And forget about missing out on festival eats. We've partnered with the industry leader in food delivery service, Grateful Groceries. Every new order of Hippie Hologram Music Festival app and mini projector will include a full year of Grateful Groceries.
Oh, wow!
It's the full festival experience without all the mud or trying to find your tent in the dark. It's the Hippie Hologram app and mini projector. All right, up next from episode 25, it's Paul Cerencioni with a story about the links we would go to get to the Dead Show.
I mean, I'd see them whenever they came nearby. I never really dropped everything and followed them on tour. I would do swings, catch the New England shows. Right. And a couple of times drove to Pittsburgh, which is like a 13-hour drive from Boston. But because it was the Stanley Theater, it was worth the drive and worth driving through a snowstorm in a crotchety old VW bus with no heat, and in a snowstorm for one of those years. I think it was the 81, early 81. They did a run in March of 81, followed by
the tires like 5 inches wide on those vans, right? That's
something like that. And the heat, they're notorious for not having any heat. And the windshield was icing over. The windshield wipers are frozen. We eventually had to pull over at a rest area and ride out the snow. And that was an adventure. Yeah. And then we continued on to University of Maryland. This is, again, March of 81. And then we got a motel. There's a bunch of us, like 6 or 7 of us. And the guy with the keys to the Volkswagen decided to wake up before everybody else and jump on a plane and head back to New York. And he had the keys to the bus with him.
Oh, no.
And so we were stranded there. And, we had to get, this is the pre-cell phone age, mind you.
Yeah.
So I can't remember exactly how I think he contacted us because he realized that he had the keys and he had the motel information. So he made arrangements. He, I think, was still at the airport, was able to get him on a flight or some sort of, service where they could get him on the next flight. We had to go to the airport, pick them up.
Oh, wow.
And then, it was crazy. It was good. But we were freaking out for a few hours, man.
All right, that's it for now. Thanks for listening. I'll be back soon with a whole new batch of Tales from the Lot. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please consider hitting the subscribe button and leaving a comment. Your feedback and engagement really goes a long way to supporting and growing the show. And really, this is your show with your stories. So if you have a story, or even a few of them from seeing Grateful Dead shows or experiences of how the band has impacted your life in some way, I'd love to hear from you and have you on. My email is will@talesfromthelot.org. Reach out. Or you could use the new Text Me feature that's in the show notes. You can easily reach out and connect with me directly that way. And don't forget to follow on Facebook for updates and exclusive content. And for those who prefer watching, full videos of every episode are available on my YouTube channel. So thanks again, and please be kind to yourself and others.